Brian Kelly is out at LSU. This is one that I did not see coming. I thought that after LSU got embarrassed by A&M, we'd roll in here on Sunday, we'd react to the game, and then a little bit later throughout the day, you'd hear about some staff changes at LSU. Hey, we got to tinker with the vehicle a little bit. They said, no, forget all that. We're just changing the driver. We're getting a brand new freaking car in here when it comes to what we're doing here in Baton Rouge. We'll talk about all of it right now. As always, this is presented by BetMGM. If you're a college football sicko, we're talking ball all year round. If you're an LSU fan, we picked y'all to win the national title in the preseason. We are right there with you in the foxhole, man. So we'll talk about this firing. We'll also talk about who maybe LSU could go after. Regardless, make sure you're subscribed because we're going to talk a lot about your Tigers here going forward. So here's my first thought when it comes to Brian Kelly being out of LSU. I think there's a handful of tier 1 jobs in college football where you have to really get the place. You have to embrace the job and everything that comes with it as much as they embrace you. I think Alabama is this way. I think USC is this way. I think A&M is this way. I think at the top of the list, LSU is this way. There is a certain standard and expectation for what that head coach is going to bring to the table and how those teams at LSU are going to play. And it felt like Brian Kelly never really all the way wrapped his arms around what LSU is and what they were supposed to be. Now, I'm not saying Brian Kelly had to do it LSU's way, but I am saying I think Brian Kelly had to be all the way in on LSU, and I never really felt like that was the case. At his post-press conference after the A&M game, he was asked a couple of questions about the fans getting, they're chanting fire Kelly in the fourth quarter. They are obviously booing LSU for the lack of on-field performance. And Brian Kelly says, yeah, I understand that, like, as any fan base would be upset. And I get where he was coming from. I understand what he meant by that. But LSU is not just any fan base. And this is not me here trying to, like, rile up the folks in Baton Rouge and say, you're not just any fan base. You deserve better. But, like, genuinely, that to me felt a little bit bizarre to hear your head coach speak to your fan base and say, yeah, as any fan base would be upset. They're not any fan base. It's LSU. There's a different standard internally. Also speaking to the expectation of LSU. I don't think that was ever truly met with the overall intensity and edge and persona of what you expect LSU football to be. That was never something that we saw from LSU over a sustained period of time. The best year he had was his first year on the job, where they played for the SEC championship. And your first year on the job usually means that you're benefiting a good amount from the coach that was there before you, A1 Ed Orgeron. It is what it is. So Brian Kelly, culturally not being a fit, I don't think it's the reason why he was fired, but I think it expedited the process. Like, you and your significant other, your ex-significant other rather, y'all didn't break up because they were mean to your friends or didn't get along with your family, but guess what? It didn't help things. It wasn't a reason to have that one last conversation or give them another 4 games to finish out the season and see where you're at. Like that, it didn't help things, my whole point of this. So was it the straw that broke the camel's back? Maybe. But if Brian Kelly had won more games, yeah, he's probably the head coach at LSU. But I think him embracing LSU and understanding what he was getting into from the jump maybe would have helped things overall when it comes to the on-field products. You can't coach the same way at LSU and operate the same way at LSU as you did at Notre Dame. And I think it's a big reason why Brian Kelly's out of a job. So very fairly today, there's going to be some folks saying, hey, $53 million owed to Brian Kelly. That's a lot of money. He only lost 3 games. Why make a move now? Like, let him finish out the season. Let's see where this whole thing goes. Are we sure that it's that bad to where we have to change head coaches? And I actually feel the opposite way. I think if you're LSU, you know how this book's going to end. Put it back on the shelf. Go make a move. It's LSU. And here's the thing, too. There's a lot of other jobs that are either open right now that are high profile you're competing with for candidates or are going to become open. Way to throw your hat in the freaking ring, LSU. The Auburn job, I think, is going to become available. The Florida State job, I think, is going to become available. Penn State job, open. Florida job, open, which you're probably competing with most heavily for candidates now. It's LSU. You don't have to settle for an 8-win season, 9-win season. Here's the best case scenario in front of the Tigers, and it did not look like that was going to be the case. Way to make a move when you know that it's not going to end in the way it's supposed to end. Like when you know you're sick, you go get medicine. LSU, very clearly now, they were sick. It wasn't a let's feel it out and see where this thing goes. Props to LSU for making a move when they understood how this whole thing was trending. All right, so who do they go hire next? Let's start with the mold. In a lot of ways, I think the wish list for that Florida job is very similar to the wish list for the LSU job. I think you need to have a guy that's going to score points. I think you need to have a guy that's going to kind of bring that swagger, the energy back, a guy who gets and understands the SEC both at a in-depth level with what the conference is, then also what it takes to acquire talent, a guy who needs to be willing to acquire talent, all those things. But I think the differentiating factor here between the Florida job and the LSU job in terms of how they're going to go about it, I've been told Florida is looking to make a splashy hire of sorts. Florida's trying to take a big swing, make contact, big name, Lane Kiffin, to put it simply here. Now, I think LSU would be fired up about getting Lane Kiffin, but I think in that same vein, I think LSU would be fired up to get Brent Key to some respects. Now, maybe he's not top of the list, but I think that LSU is going to maybe not swing. I don't want to say they're not going to swing as big, but I think it's less important for them to be splashy and more important for them to get someone who gets this job and the unique pieces that make LSU what it is. So, again, I think you're probably both going after Lane Kiffin, LSU and Florida. I think you're both probably going to give Marcus Freeman a call, understandably so. But I think that LSU has a different maybe mindset when it comes to the name they're going to hire. They're more okay with a Brent Key, or maybe Florida might not be quite as much. Again, I don't know that to be 100% the case as it regards to Brent Key, but I think that name in itself is a good measuring stick when it comes to how they're going to approach it. So here's the thing. LSU should never be in a bad spot on defense. I would be wildly shocked if we didn't see Blake Baker as the DC there next year. Lane Kiffin, if he rolled in there with that offense and whatever they're going to do through the portal, they found a way to make it go with the personnel there, because that was the thing too for LSU. Like the personnel outside of the offensive line, not in a bad shape. You can attract a quarterback and you can dial it up schematically. LSU's going to be tough to beat. LSU's going to be a problem here over the course of the next, I don't know how many years, if Lane Kiffin's your guy. So we'll have a full separate video for you on this when it comes to names that I think we should all watch and names that would just quite frankly be a good fit at LSU. But at the end of the day, shout out to LSU for making a move when you knew it was heading a certain direction. Brian Kelly is out in Baton Rouge. Wild times in college football, but a lot of money going into these programs. And when you see the whole thing trending towards a certain ending in the book, good for LSU to skip into the end and putting it back on the shelf. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section. Again, make sure you're subscribed. Cato on the ones and twos. Myself, JD PicKell. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. We will keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.